Good morning and welcome to the South Carolina Public Service Commission. Today is Thursday, October 31st, 2024, Halloween. At approximately 10 a.m., we are here for case number 2024-5G, which is an annual review of purchase gas adjustment and gas purchasing policies of Dominion Energy South Carolina, Inc. First, we do a roll call of commissioners. All commissioners participating are here in the hearing room. Commissioner Vice Chair Williams is on leave today and will not participate in this hearing. Now I'll ask Ms. Westner Hill if she would to please read the docket.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The hearing before you this morning is in docket number 2024-5-G concerning the annual review of purchase gas adjustment and gas purchasing policies of Dominion Energy South Carolina, Incorporated. This hearing was scheduled and noticed by the clerk's office to be held today, October 31st, beginning at 10 a.m. Mr. Chairman, upon inquiry of all participating counsel of record, the counsel for the parties of record are present and available upon your call for appearances. The docket is ready and there are no opening or preliminary matters, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Would the parties please introduce themselves, beginning with the company?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. I'm Elizabeth Hutton, in-house counsel representing Dominion Energy South Carolina, along with Chad Burgess.
Thank you very much. ORS.
Good morning, Chair Powers and members of the Commission. Donna Rainey on behalf of the Office of Regulatory Staff, and with me today is Chad Torrey.
Thank you very much and good morning. All right. If there's nothing further before we begin, then Dominion, is your case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dominion Energy calls Greg McGlohorn, Darren Call, and Jatan Smith to come forward at this time.
All right. Come forward and be sworn.
If you would raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Mr. McGlohorn, please state your full name for the record.
Greg Brandon McGlohorn.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Dominion Energy South Carolina, and my role is General Manager, Gas Operations Support.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared and pre-filed in this docket direct testimony consisting of 17 pages?
Yes, I did.
Are there any changes or corrections that you would like to make to your direct testimony?
Yes, I do have some changes.
Would you please direct the Commission and other parties of record to the page number and line number where correction is required?
Yes, on page 5, line 21, 326 miles of transmission mains should be changed to 434 miles of transmission mains. And therefore, on line 20 on the same page, 11,238 miles of pipeline should be changed to 11,346 miles.
Subject to those corrections, if I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, we would move into the record the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. McGlohorn as corrected, as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed corrected direct testimony of Mr. Greg McGlohorn will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. McGlohorn, do you have any exhibits attached to your direct testimony?
Yes, I do.
Are there any changes or corrections that you would like to make to the exhibit attached to your direct testimony?
No.
Mr. Chairman, we would move into the record the exhibit attached to Mr. McGlohorn's direct testimony, identified as GBM-1.
The pre-filed exhibits of witness McGlohorn identified as GBM1 is marked for identification and will be placed in the record as exhibit number 1.
Mr. McGlohorn, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes.
Please deliver it at this time.
Good morning, Chairman Powers and members of the Commission. The purpose of today's proceeding is to determine the prudence of Dominion Energy South Carolina's gas purchasing policies and practices during the period of August 1st, 2023 through July 31st, 2024, and to determine if the company properly applied its tariff in recovering its gas costs. The company has developed a safe and reliable natural gas system through which we serve our customers. Over time, Dominion Energy South Carolina has seen its natural gas system grow to approximately 11,346 miles of pipeline, which includes approximately 10,912 miles of distribution mains and 434 miles of transmission mains, plus approximately 472,000 service lines. Through these facilities, the company delivers safe, reliable natural gas service to approximately 460,000 factories, businesses, and homes in South Carolina. Dominion Energy South Carolina also owns and operates 2 liquefied natural gas facilities, which allow the storage of natural gas in liquid form to be used primarily to help meet peak loads on the system and as a backup supply of gas in emergency situations. Firm demand on the company's system has continued to grow, and Dominion Energy South Carolina has consistently improved and expanded its system by adding pipeline to serve its new and existing customers and create operating flexibility on its system. During the review period, the company prudently managed its business operations, which included the purchase and recovery of its gas supplies and administration of the PGA. Therefore, on behalf of Dominion Energy South Carolina, I respectfully request the Commission find that the company has recovered its gas costs for the review period consistent with its tariff and commission orders, and that it has purchased its gas supplies and administered the PGA in a prudent and reasonable manner. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. McLehorn. Mr. Call, please state your full name for the record.
James Darren Call,
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Dominion Energy Services as the manager of gas supply.
Did you prepare, cause to be prepared, and pre-filed in this docket direct testimony consisting of 14 pages?
Yes, I did.
Are there any changes or corrections that you would like to make to your direct testimony?
Yes, I have 2 corrections. On page 10, line 7, the third word in, A-N-D, strike the letter D, so it's just A-N. After the word increase, insert the word of, O-F, so it should read rates or an increase of.
Subject to those corrections, if I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, we would move into the record the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Call as corrected, as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Call will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Call, do you have any exhibits attached to your direct testimony?
Yes, I do.
Are there any changes or corrections that you would like to make to the exhibits attached to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
Mr. Chairman, we would move into the record the exhibits attached to Mr. Call's direct testimony, identified as JDK-1 and JDK-2.
The pre-filed exhibits of witness call identified as JDK 1 and 2, marked for identification, will be placed in the record as exhibit number 2. And let me state earlier, that was the corrected direct testimony, which is put into evidence. I don't think I said that.
Mr. Call, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Please deliver it at this time.
Good morning, Chairman Powers and members of the Commission. My testimony discusses the company's portfolio of natural gas supply. During the review period, the company's gas asset portfolio relied upon all 4 gas supply options available to it, namely wellhead gas supply, underground storage secured from Southern Natural Gas Company, or Southern, and Transcontinental Gas Pipeline, or Transco, liquefied natural gas, known as LNG, and compressed natural gas, commonly known as CNG. Dominion Energy South Carolina combines these supply options with interstate transportation to meet its firm demand under varying weather conditions at reasonable cost. During the review period, Dominion Energy South Carolina contracted for sufficient supplies of natural gas, provided reliable service to its customers, and adequately and prudently maintained gas supply, storage, and transportation assets to meet the needs of the system. At this, I respectfully request the Commission find that Dominion Energy South Carolina's costs for gas purchases and asset management were reasonable and prudent for the review period. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Call. Ms. Smith, please state your full name for the record.
Jatan R. Smith.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Dominion Energy Services as the Manager of Regulation.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared and pre-filed in this docket direct testimony consisting of 11 pages?
Yes, I did.
Are there any changes or corrections that you would like to make to your direct testimony?
No, they are not.
If I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, we would move into the record the pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Smith as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Smith will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Smith, do you have any exhibits attached to your direct testimony?
Yes, I do.
Are there any changes or corrections that you would like to make to the exhibits attached to your direct testimony?
No, there are not.
Mr. Chairman, we would move into the record the exhibits attached to Mrs. Smith's direct testimony identified as JRS-1, JRS-2, and JRS-3.
The pre-filed exhibits of witness Smith identified as JRS-1, JRS-2, and JRS-3 are marked for identification will be placed in the record as exhibit number 3.
Thank you. Mrs. Smith, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Please deliver it at this time.
Good morning, Chairman Powers and members of the Commission. I am appearing today to support the company's natural gas cost recovery mechanism and to support the cost of gas data for the period under review in this proceeding, which is August 1st, 2023 through July 31st, 2024. In administering the company's cost of gas recovery mechanism, Dominion Energy South Carolina calculates the gas cost factor for each customer class each month using a rolling 12-month forecast of both demand and commodity cost. The company reviews the demand charge cost of gas allocation factors each year during the PGA proceeding and updates the factors to reflect current forecast parameters. Pursuant to Order Number 2023-737A and Docket Number 2023-70-G, these allocations are based on the forecast peak design day demand. Based on the latest demand forecast, the new DCOG allocation factors will be 75.43% for residential, 20.28% for small general service and medium general service, and 4.29% for large general service usage groups. DESC respectfully requests that these new DCOG allocation factors be approved by the Commission and made effective for the first billing cycle of January 2025. While not included in my direct testimony, I do want to take this moment to point out that due to the closing of Rate 35 effective in April 2025, the company will file updated DCOG allocation factors for approval with this Commission in the first quarter of 2025. Exhibit JRS-1 accurately reflects administration of the PGA recovery mechanism as approved by the Commission, and Exhibit JRS-2 shows a summary of the monthly forecast of gas cost components and the resulting monthly over and under collection balances. The end of period balance of zero shows that the forecasted gas cost factors would eliminate any projected over or under collection amount by the end of the forecast period ending August 2025. Exhibit JRS-3 is the PGA analysis report that provides the company's analysis of a 24-month, 18-month, and 5-cent or greater threshold PGA forecast as required by Order Number 2023-908. The PGA analysis report concludes that a 24-month, 18-month, and 5-cent or greater PGA forecast should not be implemented because these forecasts do not provide greater predictability or benefits to customers. Based on the analysis conducted, the company concludes that the PGA mechanism should not be adjusted. During the review period, Dominion Energy South Carolina properly administered the purchase gas adjustment and correctly adjusted the gas cost recovery factors for each customer class in accordance with the terms of order numbers 2006-679, 2009-910, and 2023-737A. In addition, Dominion Energy South Carolina recovered its gas costs consistent with applicable tariffs and commission orders. Accordingly, Dominion Energy South Carolina respectfully requests the commission find that the company has recovered its gas costs for the review period consistent with its tariffs and commission orders, and that it has purchased its gas supplies and administered the PGA in a prudent and reasonable manner. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Chairman, this panel is available for questions from ORS and the Commission.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rainey, you or Ms. Torrey have any questions?
No questions from us.
Thank you very much. Any commissioner questions? Commissioner Belser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, panel.
Good
Thank
morning.
you all for being here today. My question is really just to Mr. Kale. During the review period, or toward the end of the review period, the Mountain Valley Pipeline came into service, did it not?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
And I think we'd heard previously that Dominion had signed a precedent agreement for capacity on the pipeline.
That's correct.
How has that pipeline helped Dominion?
So with with that pipeline coming in service, what it's done is it's provided gas supplies in the what we call the Transco Zone 5 market, which is located near the North Carolina-Virginia border. And so that gas is basically like an injection point for that area of the market. So what we're seeing with that gas supplies is that's helped reduce the commodity cost of gas in that area. So over the last 4 months that it's been in service, what we've seen is from a commodity perspective, gas prices that are trading at that point that we're able to secure are about 50 to 80 cents lower than gas that we can get on Southern Natural or in Transco back in the Zone 4 kind of Gulf region area. So it's been a big help since it's been in service.
And being able to get gas through Mountain Valley Pipeline, does that help with any reserves that the company needs as far as ensuring an adequate gas supply?
And it doesn't necessarily increase the capacity for that, but it provides a fuel source to be able to gain access to those cheaper supplies to bring to our Transco capacity. And then from that Transco capacity, we bring it on to Carolina Gas Transmission into South Carolina.
Okay, so has it helped with the volume of gas that Dominion needs to serve its customers?
It's helped with the supply, geographic diversity in the supply mix. So we're not concentrated necessarily in one area back towards the Gulf area. So it gives us more supply options, supply optionality.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Belser. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, panel.
Good morning.
So, Mr. Call, is that the way you pronounce your name?
Yes, sir.
So this is your first time here, I believe. Is that correct?
I've been here previously, a while back.
Oh, okay. And so you spent some time in Alaska, is my understanding. Is that?
I have not.
You have not?
No, sir.
All right. I must have you confused with somebody else. I apologize. Let me ask about a couple of things here. So you mentioned the the CGT and the FERC filing and the settlement. So is that settlement fully in effect at this point?
The FERC has not has not signed off on it yet, but we are working under the agreement that as though it has been approved by the FERC, but it hasn't been officially approved yet. We expect that approval to come probably later towards the end of the fourth quarter.
All right. So in your exhibit JDK1 with the transportation and storage, the looks like there are a number of contracts that are significant that'll be expiring soon. We got August of 2025 on the Southern Natural Gas firm transportation, significant volumes there, and on the Carolina Gas Transmission, October 31st, 2026. Is there anything that you can say about those contracts and what's happening and the prospects for the future?
Sure. So those contracts, when we signed up for them, they have evergreen clauses in them. So some of them have stated time periods. So when the contract expires, a notification period if you want to relinquish the contract. And if you don't do that, then what happens is the contract automatically triggers in the evergreen provision, a certain stated time period for a number of years further out. So in some of these, like the CGT ones, I think it's like a minimum of 5 years automatic extension, so to speak. And the same thing for the ones for Southern Natural. They're under a rate case at the moment with Southern Natural, and in those negotiations, there will be some contract extensions coming forward.
Okay. And so that is true with regards to the storage as well as the transportation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. McGlowan, you had some information in your testimony in connection with a project in I'm gonna call it the Myrtle Beach area, the River Neck Road, I believe is what it's called. And that one's been, that project apparently is still on hold, waiting action by the court. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Thomas, that project, we call it River Neck Road. It runs from the Florence area. It's a transmission system that moves gas to the Myrtle Beach area and various points in between. But that project is currently being stayed at the South Carolina Court of Appeals. The permit was issued a few years ago. It was challenged by a non-governmental organization, DHEC. The DHEC board upheld their permit, then went to administrative law judge. Administrative law judge upheld the permit, then it went to the Court of Appeals. And until the Court of Appeals is able to hear it, until they're able to get it scheduled on their docket, they have issued a stay.
All right. And so that's having a pretty significant impact on what can happen down in the Myrtle Beach area. Is that correct? Yes,
absolutely. It has a big impact. That project is an important project to be able to serve Horry County and the entire Myrtle Beach area and frankly, even other parts of the PD region. And until we have certainty with that project and other projects that are related to that project, it definitely results in constraints for that area.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that update. We recently had our reviews in front of the PERC committee, and I was asked a question about, capacity and projects and, what kind of problems are out there. And I think I told the committee that it was generally outside the state of South Carolina. So I wasn't aware of this one, so I guess I stand corrected. Appreciate your input. That's all I have right now.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning.
Along those lines, Mr. McGlohorn, relative to, I guess, the temporary mobile LNG and compressed natural gas, I assume you still have those to help ameliorate the situation in the coastal plain in that Myrtle Beach area. Is that?
Yes, sir. We've identified 3 sites for temporary mobile peak shaving for this coming winter season.
Are those more short-term, I guess, solutions rather than long-term solutions?
Yes, sir. They are. 2 of them in particular. 2 of them are absolutely short-term. A third one is one where we have went ahead and purchased a property. It's toward the North Myrtle Beach area off of Water Tower Road. And that's just in case we should ever need that type of peak shaving in the future. But however, if we get the River Neck Road project completed, as well as other planned projects downstream of River Neck Road, and we continue to make the improvements that we've identified that we would need to keep up with the growth, then our intent would be to get to a situation where we don't need any of those. But as of today, it is a useful tool to have in the toolbox. It's not unusual for gas companies to utilize peak shaving for various reasons. Sometimes it's for cost control. Sometimes it's for, to deal with permitting delays like we're dealing with right now in the court litigation. So I would characterize them as temporary in nature. But like I said, one of those projects or one of those locations, we did purchase the lot so that we can have it if we ever needed it beyond short term.
So if the delays continue longer, I don't know what that time would be, would the company have to consider other solutions, or is this solution, how long can that survive?
Well, we feel like with 3 temporary peak shaving facilities, we can operate 3. I think if we got into more sites than that, I think it would start to become very difficult from an operational standpoint to keep up with more and more sites, which is why we have had to really look at our commitments for future growth and be very careful about what we are willing to commit to for the future until we have certainty with the litigation associated with the projects that we've mentioned.
Okay. Somewhere in your testimony, I remember when you were talking about service lines, I think 20% were steel, 80% polyethylene. And I was really just curious. Well, one, the polyethylene, is that just regular polyethylene or HDPE? Or
It's medium density polyethylene, MDPE.
From a, I guess, operational point of view, does it matter? Whether it's steel, is it just a cost thing, a reliability thing, or is just what it is?
Well, historically, if you go back in time before the advent of medium density polyethylene pipe, there was only steel. So we have legacy steel gas mains and services that operate at what we call medium pressure, which is anything less than 60 pounds per square inch. When you get above 60 pounds per square inch, we design everything as steel. So if it's anything that's new and modern, and it's going to be operating with a maximum allowable operating pressure of 60 psi or less, we're going to most likely install that as the plastic medium density polyethylene. There are some exceptions to that. If we were going to bore underneath a railroad track or underneath a major highway, maybe like an interstate or intercoastal waterway bore, or if we needed to maintain electrical continuity for cathodic protection. But in general, anything new is going to be plastic if it's less than 60 pounds per square inch. Anything new is going to be steel if it's operating at a higher pressure than that. And the biggest reason for that is that the The medium density polyethylene can handle up to 60 PSI, and it's much easier to work with. You don't have to have a welder. You can use fittings that are much easier to use, and you can use butt fusion instead of welding, things of that nature. It's just easier to operate on. And then if you have a leak or need to make a repair, you can squeeze it off as opposed to having to weld on fittings to stop off the flow if you don't have a valve handy nearby where you need one. So it's just more of a operational issue.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Call?
Yes, sir.
Cal,
Call.
you've been asked 3 times. Surely I'd picked it up by now.
That's okay.
You talk about in your testimony about continuing to evaluate marketplace, seek opportunities to participate in larger interstate pipelines and such as that. Are there any specific projects or opportunities, or is this kind of like blue sky thinking, or are there projects that seem to be viable and?
Yes, sir. So right now, the company has entered into a precedent agreement with Southern Natural Gas for a potential project that's scheduled to come online late 2028. So that's one of the things that we have in the queue lined up. We're seeking further capacity to get into South Carolina as well. So we'll combine those 2 projects together to in the future to serve, but those projects aren't scheduled till about the 2028 timeframe. So in the interim period, we are continuing to look at some of opportunities that may arise and present themselves that we can take advantage of.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you all, and that's no more questions.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Mr. McLaughlin, you anticipated you were reaching for your mic. I was curious about the difference between the number of customers and the number of service lines, because they're close, but they're not exact.
Right. There is a slight discrepancy there, Commissioner Williams, and the reason for that is that some of our service lines are what we call inactive. So, for example, you may have let's just say it's a structure that we're serving gas to today, maybe a warehouse. And if that company goes out of business, we may pull that meter, but the service line and the riser coming up out of the ground where the meter set would be remains. And we will leave that there as long as it's safe in anticipation of a future business to move in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason for the discrepancy there. The 460,000 is roughly, or at the time was our number of customers. Is probably slightly more than that now. But then there were another approximately 12,000 of those inactive services.
Makes total sense. Thank you. Mr. Call, I enjoyed your conversation with Commissioner Thomas about no, it's Mr. McLaughlin. I'm sorry. That's why I take notes. About the River Neck Road project, and I just wondered what the timing was likely to be related to the Court of Appeals.
Well, Commissioner Williams, I'm hesitant to venture a guess on that, but I will give you. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know their docket, but from what I've been made to understand, I think they are maybe hearing cases now that are a year or 2 old. I would not quote me on that, but that's what we're kind of thinking. Maybe in the next year or 2, they may be able to hear our case. Somebody else with more expertise may be able to offer a better timeline, but that's what I've been led to believe. And then once they make a ruling, which we are confident that the permit will be upheld, then we'll have to see where does it go from there. Is it further litigated, or are we going to proceed with construction?
Thank you. Mm-hmm. That may be all my questions, so I'm checking. Ms. Smith, would you talk a little bit about the analysis that you did as a product of a prior order and I know it was in your summary, but just for clarity in the record, in terms of the, you know, in terms of the threshold question and the, I'm clearly struggling, but you were looking at advantages and disadvantages associated with how you look at the collection and the time frame under which you look at them. Would you summarize that for us, please?
Certainly, Commissioner. So in compliance with the order from last year's PGA proceeding, the company performed what we call a PGA forecast analysis for 3 different scenarios as ordered. The first scenario was a 12-month PGA forecast. We currently use a rolling 12-month PGA forecast. Excuse me, I may need to correct myself. We currently use a 12-month rolling PGA forecast, and we performed an analysis on a 24-month PGA forecast. That analysis, we recalculated our forecast for the months of January 2022 through January 2023, and we selected that period so that we can compare that to our 12-month forecast. We knew what our actual costs were, so we did a comparison of how many times the PGA rate changed between the 2 scenarios. We did a comparison of the change in the over and under collection balance for that time period, and we looked by month to see what's the average factor, what's the change in the factor for both commodity and demand for the 24-month forecast. Our conclusion for the 24-month forecast was that by extending the forecast by an additional 12 months, the under collection balance grew. And so that was an indicator that the rates that were calculated with the 24-month forecast were less accurate than the rates that were calculated under the 12-month forecast. Similarly, we conducted an 18-month PGA forecast. The results from the 18-month forecast were very similar to the 24-month forecast in that the under collection balance grew. We looked at how many times the rate changed. We looked at the average rate. We did notate in our report some inconsistencies in the sales data that was used in the 18-month forecast, and that is related to the number of winter months that were included with the additional 6 months that were picked up with each forecast. Our conclusion for the 18-month was very similar. We did not feel that provided more accuracy due to the under collection balance growing. And then the last scenario that we conducted was a 5-cent PGA threshold for changing rates. We currently utilize a 4-cent threshold. The results of the 5-cent PGA threshold were not that much different from our 4-cent threshold that we currently utilize in terms of how many times the rate changed, what the under collection balance was, and what the actual rate billed was. So in that analysis, we determined that a 5-cent threshold was not much different in results from our current 4-cent threshold. And we also included in the report that increasing that threshold higher than 5 cents would result in customers experiencing larger bill impacts whenever the rate did change. So, for example, instead of customers experiencing the impact of a 4-cent increase or decrease, if we increase that threshold to 5 cents or greater, then that impact to their bill when rates do change is going to be higher or a larger impact. So, in conclusion, we concluded that the 24-month forecast, the 18-month forecast, and the 5-cent threshold did not provide greater predictability in terms of rates, and it did not provide benefit to customers. And therefore, we concluded that our PGA mechanism, no changes were needed, and we should continue with our current 12-month rolling PGA forecast.
And is that last paragraph that you shared with me, is that the way you would present it to, somebody comes up to you at at a party and asks you, what you've been thinking about, looking at work? Is that how you would summarize it to the public or to, a friend in terms of the impact? Or would you feel free to kind of summarize it, for the public now, understanding you've just given us a very fulsome explanation?
So a high-level summary, the 18-month and 24-month PGA forecasts do not provide greater predictability in terms of the rate, and that is seen by the increase in the under-collection balances in our analysis. And the 4-cent threshold does not, the 5-cent PGA threshold would result in customers having larger bill impacts when rates do change. So as a result of our analysis, we've concluded that our current 12-month rolling PGA forecast mechanism should be continued.
Thank you. I think I've got one other question. But I'm not seeing it, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Ms. Smith, obviously, if wanted for people to understand, a longer period that you use to make a forecast, the less likely it is to be accurate. I think that's what we're pretty much saying.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, both you gentlemen, and I'm not sure who said it, but I heard the word emergency in some of the presentation this morning, and I'm just thinking about not a worst case, but a bad case scenario. The storage of 2.32%, is that storage, or is that in counting what's going to come in on a truck, LNG, or exactly what? Could you break that down for me just a little bit?
So the 2.3% represents the reserve margin that the company has when you compare the peak day demand forecast versus the transportation assets that the company has in place.
Okay. Well, say we have a bad winter storm. Transportation could shut down. Do you have sufficient storage to get you through a few bad days like that?
So in addition to that, we also have what we have in the, I believe in that exhibit, is segmentation. And in segmentation, what we use there is we count on the Bushy Park facility down in Charleston area. And for that component of it, we have about 40,000 of segmentation capacity that can be utilized on those peak days to fill that void.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Cole, don't feel bad about people mispronouncing your name. They named me Delton, and I'm from Clio, so it builds character.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin, I was about to say a few years ago, but I guess it was a few decades ago, I was on the Coastal Council and then on the OCRM, which went up under DHEC. And I was there when we created the Ace Basin thing. You talk about the area at Myrtle Beach with the lawsuit. And I wondered about Kennedy's and some of the areas down there. How many additional miles of pipeline do you think is going to be needed in the near future or in the future?
So you're asking how many miles of natural gas pipeline may be needed in the
Yes.
state in the near
Yes,
future?
and particularly, well, I guess I think coastal more or less, because I know that's where you're going to get the most opposition, particularly environmental and crossing streams and getting into some protected areas. Just kind of tell me how you deal with that and what problems you foresee.
Well, a lot of the answer to that question depends on how much growth we see as a state, which right now along our coastal areas, it is a lot of growth. However, I will say that for most of the projects that are being contemplated, certainly not all of them, but when I think about the River Neck Road project, for example, we're utilizing existing pipeline corridors, existing rights of way. For River Neck Road, I think we're trying to procure maybe an extra 10 feet of additional easement just to make sure we have enough room to move all the equipment around and get the pipe installed. And of course, I do not work on the electric power generation side of our company, but I do know that there are electric transmission corridors that could potentially be used to install pipelines to potentially serve new power generation facilities. So I think we would normally try to utilize existing utility corridors when we can and minimize the impact whenever we can, and use what they call those brownfield type sites and corridors. But as new projects come up and a new development, assuming we have capacity to serve it, and a new development arises in an area where we currently do not have facilities, then we would need to install those facilities to serve it. So it's hard for me to predict how many miles we may need, but certainly if we continue to grow, we'll need to continue to add facilities to keep up with the growth.
And with a lot of your gas coming in through the northern part, Mountain Valley and all that area, and this may be a simple and it may be a stupid question. How do you get gas to places like Beaufort and Hilton Head and down that far?
Yes, sir. Well, Hilton Head, unfortunately, we do not serve Hilton Head. So,
okay, well, that answers that question.
But we do serve Beaufort, Bluffton, and those type areas. And really, it speaks to the Myrtle Beach issue. And I guess I want to just take a minute to mention this.
Sure.
Darren, witness call, excuse me, he and his team focus on buying the molecules from the well fields and where the gas comes out of the ground. And then there are gathering lines that gas goes through. And then from there, it goes into other transmission, interstate transmission pipelines, eventually into the Transco and Southern Natural pipelines, and then eventually into Carolina Gas Transmission, and then moves all the way across the state to our various town borders where we take receipt of that gas and move it through our transmission system. And then once it gets to the end of our transmission system, it oftentimes goes through our high pressure systems to eventually get to our high pressure will be over 60 PSI, but not yet transmission stresses on the pipe. Then eventually into our distribution network, medium pressure distribution network. So if you look at somewhere like Myrtle Beach, you basically, and Bluffton is a fast growing area as well, but in Charleston, these areas along the coast of South Carolina are our fastest growing areas. But if you look at how far those methane molecules have to go from where they come out of the ground, they're about as far away as you can get, and they have to go through about as many layers of pipeline as you can have to get to where the demand is. So it's a challenge, but it's a cascade of upstream pipelines that those molecules move through from where it comes out of the ground and either down in the southeast around the Gulf or in the northeast now with the shale gas, and it eventually makes it to our system, and we move it through our system and eventually through our distribution system to the end user.
I have a house in Port Royal just outside of Beaufort, and when people start talking about looking for property, we tell them, yeah, go look in Bluffton.
Yes,
and I have gas water heater, I have gas stove, I have gas fireplace. I just want to make sure you keep getting it there.
Yes, sir.
You and I, neither one can guess what the Court of Appeals time frame is. But are there any other lawsuits or future projects that you think are going to be slowed down by this type of challenge?
At this time, that's the River Neck Road project is the only River Neck Road, what we call phase 1 and phase 2, the initial section of that transmission system is the only one that's currently being challenged in the court system.
And it's over a right of way?
It's over the DHEC 401 water quality certification, which is
Okay.
basically an environmental permit that we feel is adequate, but I guess others disagree, and DHEC feels is adequate. But
DHEC gave you the permit?
Yes, sir, they did.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any further commissioner questions? Sure. Commissioner Caston.
Just out of curiosity, to follow up on the question, whether it's a creek crossing or freshwater, saltwater estuary. Uh, Typically, and I don't know what the permit requires, but with these lines you run, I don't know if these kind of lines are HDPE or what you use, but are they typically open cut? Do you bore them? Do you tunnel?
Commissioner Caston, they can be open cut, but typically I would say almost all of the water crossings that we do today are done by horizontal directional drilling, where we would set up, in many cases, several hundred feet on each side of the waterway to get down to the adequate depth and to bore underneath it. And at each end, we would have what we call a bore pit, where the drilling rods would enter and exit, and where the pipe would be pulled in. So usually we're not working anywhere near the water body, and we have sediment and erosion controls in place around those bore pits, just to contain any drilling fluid or anything along those lines. So we feel very confident that the projects that we do with modern construction techniques have very little impact on the environment when we perform them correctly as we do.
Thank you for that information.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Commissioner Williams, did you find your question?
I did. Mr. McGlohorn, it's on page
Yes.
10 of your testimony. I don't know that you need to go there, but you talk about the company not having been able to test its design day demand projections against empirical data in the last 40 years. Tell me more about that. Should design day projections be evaluated?
That's a great question. I will attempt to answer it, but if you look also on that same page, well, I think it was on that same page, actually. Maybe it was the previous page, page 9. Our design day, our coldest gas day on record, which, by the way, can be different than a calendar day. Gas day goes from 10 a.m. to 10 a.m. for our planning purposes.
Why is that?
Well, just to get through the winter, on a cold morning, to get through that heat, those peak hourly heating hours.
Okay.
Presumably by 10 o'clock, maybe it's starting to warm up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the gas day goes from 10 a.m. to 10 a.m. And it's an industry-wide clock there. But the coldest day that we have on record for our service territory occurred on December 25th, 1983. It has not been that cold since. And in fact, I would say that it really hasn't even approached it. It certainly could, because 1983 was a long time ago, but in terms of geologic time and the age of this planet, that's not very long at all. So we're not willing to gamble that it's not going to get that cold again. So we feel the prudent thing to do is to plan for that extreme cold weather and assume that it can occur again. The issue is, like, if you just look at the last 5 years, I believe in my testimony on page 10, it says that the highest heating degree day that we've had, that we've experienced, has been around 41. So as cold as it's been in some of these winter storms we've had in recent years, that's not really, it's not even approaching the day that we design our system for. So it can get a lot colder than it has been. And since it has not been that cold, if you look at, if you ever watch the news and you see where they draw the jet stream on the television, I mean, that Charlotte area, if you're just north of Charlotte, you can be on the north side of the jet stream. And if you're just south of Charlotte, sometimes you can be on, and that can be a pretty drastic temperature change. So we could be very close to getting those temperatures, but the fact remains, in the last, say, 40 years, we just have not seen that weather that matches what we saw in 1983, 1985, 1989 years. So what we have to do is we have to use methodologies that would project what our peak day demand would be if we saw weather that cold. Now, if you're in certain places, I'm sure there are places in Canada where they probably, or maybe even in more northern states in the United States, where the actual observed weather approaches or at least gets close to the peak day that they designed for. But in our case, the delta there between the coldest day we've had in history and the coldest day we see on any given winter, in recent years anyway, it just exists. So we have to estimate what it would be as best we can. So when I say we don't have empirical data to test our peak day demand that witness calls reserve margins are based on, It's because we just haven't seen that weather.
Forgive me if I didn't hear this, but what could you be testifying and saying that same thing in 80 years? And what I'm getting at is when does the analysis drop the 1983, 1989, and whatever, 85 maybe is what you said?
That's a very fair question, Commissioner Williams, and I guess my answer would be, well, as long as I'm involved with the process, as long as I'm here, we're not gonna drop it, because as an engineer, I'm gonna design for that worst case scenario. And as I said, we've probably only been keeping weather records for what, 200 years. And the Earth has been around for a long time. We're not willing to assume that it's not going to get that cold again, even though it may not. And maybe that means our system's a little over-designed if we never did see that day. But if we did see that weather, that is what our system is designed for.
And it's mostly a curiosity. It's not a pushing back in any way, but
Right.
just there's a lot of testimony we get in various dockets that are very mathematical, very very fact-based, and so that's why I chose to ask about it.
I do know that some gas utilities, I have heard just from various roundtables and industry meetings, some use, say, the coldest day in the last 35 years, for example, or the coldest day in the last 50 years. But as I said, we're just not willing to gamble that coldest day won't rear its ugly head again. And if
Right.
it does, we want to be prepared for it.
I remember the one in 83, so I
Very
get it.
cold.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. One more thing has kind of come up, Mr. McLaughlin. And it's coming up in cases with the supposed climate change and weather change and extreme things we're dealing with. Do you think, just in your opinion, do you think historical data is the way to predict things like weather, using historical data only? Or do you think there should be some sort of other model looked at with the extreme storms we're seeing?
Well, as I said, I'm a meteorologist, not a weatherman, but I will say that we study the weather a good bit in our profession to make sure that we can be prepared for extreme weather when it happens. And I wish I had brought it with me, but I plotted out the lowest recorded temperature for various cities in our service territory, Columbia, Charleston. And you just observe various things. When you look at the lowest annual temperature recorded in, say, Columbia, for example, you see that to me at least, it appears to come and go in cycles. There were periods where it was warmer, say from the 1950s to the 1980s. And then in the 1980s was a period where you saw much lower low temperatures. And then since the 1980s, you've seen warmer low temperatures that kind of mirror what you would see, if I remember it right, from the chart I printed out from, say, the 1950s to the 1980s. So I don't know if it's a cyclical recurring pattern or if we're on a different trajectory. All I know is what the charts look like when I print them out, and that's how we study things. And that's going back to Commissioner Williams' question, which is why even if there's gradual warming, we're not convinced that we won't still see that coldest day that we saw in 1983. So all we can do is just prepare for that.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you very much. Any further commissioner questions? Hearing none, Dominion. Is that your case?
We have no redirect in that.
Okay. Witnesses would be excused. I think it's a little bit early, but I think we'll take up before we put the ORS panel up. Let's go ahead and take a morning break and come back at 11:15. We're in recess. Good morning again. We are back on the hearing as to 2024 5G Dominion Energy Annual Review of Purchase Gas Adjustment and Gas Purchasing Policies. The applicant has completed their case, and we are now going to the Office of Regulatory Staff. Ms. Rainey?
Thanks, Chair Powers. Office of Regulatory Staff calls Courtney Radley, Kiba Kemp, and Michael Seaman Wynn to the stand as a panel.
Come forward.
You would raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give with the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Ms. Radley, I'll begin with you. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Courtney Radley.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the state of South Carolina as an audit manager for the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 7 pages of pre-filed direct testimony that was filed in this docket on October 14th, 2024?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any edits, changes, or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I were to ask you the same questions as those posed in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, I move that Ms. Radley's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Courtney Radley will be entered in the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Ms. Radley, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared three exhibits marked as exhibits CDR1 through CDR3, which are pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any edits, changes, or corrections to those exhibits?
No, I do not.
Chair Powers, I move that Ms. Radley's exhibits CDR1 through CDR3 be entered into the record as the next composite hearing exhibit.
So is there a CDR2? Is this one through 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Is a 1, 2, and 3?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
All right. The pre-filed exhibits of witness Radley identified as CDR1 through 3 will be marked for identification and placed in the record as exhibit number 4.
Thank you. Ms. Radley, did you prepare a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Please present it at this time.
Good morning, Chair Powers and members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony is to present the findings and recommendations resulting from the ORS Audit Department's examination of Dominion Energy South Carolina's purchased gas adjustment and gas purchasing policies for the period August 2023 through July 2024, which is the review period. Exhibit CDR1 presents, for each month of the review period, the components which comprise the cumulative PGA over or under collection. Dominion began the period with a net under collection of $25,841,498. Activity during the review period for the various components in the PGA resulted in an over collection balance on July 31st, 2024 of $4,067,917, with 2 corrections to be made in August 2024. During ORS's review of the PGA, the company provided ORS with detailed calculations of its interstate pipeline storage and liquefied natural gas, or LNG, storage facility inventories. ORS accumulated the various inventory levels by storage location in total. Exhibits CDR2 and CDR3 summarize the total inventory levels by storage location for Commission consideration. Based on its examination, ORS accepts the company's PGA over collection balance on July 31st, 2024 of $4,067,921, shown on company witness Smith's exhibit number JRS-1, with the exception of the 2 corrections noted in witness Smith's direct testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Radley. Ms. Kim, I'll go to you next. Please state your name for the record. By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
It's working. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as a regulatory analyst.
Are you the same Kiba Kemp that pre-filed 3 pages of direct testimony in this case on October 14th, 2024?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any edits, changes, or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
I do not.
And if I were to ask you the same questions as those posed in your pre-filed testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers ORS asks that Ms. Kemp's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Kemp will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Kemp, did you prepare a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony?
I did.
Please present it at this time.
Good morning, Chair Powers and members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony is to present ORS's findings and recommendations regarding its review and examination of Dominion Energy South Carolina's new construction projects noticed to the Commission during the review period. ORS has assessed the information provided by the company on its construction projects and identified 3 notices of new natural gas construction projects filed to the Commission for a total of 23 construction projects. ORS found that these projects provide additional gas infrastructure, aid in expanding the natural gas distribution system, and increase total customers and sales on the company's natural gas distribution system. ORS will continue to monitor these projects until completion. This concludes my summary.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Seaman Nguyen, please state your name for the record.
Michael Seaman Nguyen.
By whom are you employed in what capacity?
I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as the Deputy Director of Energy Operations.
Are you the same Michael Seaman Nguyen who prepared a cause to be prepared 12 pages of pre-filed direct testimony in this docket on October 14th, 2024?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes, edits, or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes. On page 3, line 14, the exhibit JDK1 should be replaced with exhibit number JRS1 and exhibit number JRS2. ORS filed a corrected page 3 of my pre-filed direct testimony on October 21st, 2024.
If I ask you the questions, including the correction you just made, as that was posed in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Okay. Chair Powers, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Michael Seaman Nguyen be entered into the record, including the correction that was later filed that he mentioned, as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony as corrected of Mr. Michael Seaman Nguyen will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman Nguyen, did you prepare a summary of your testimony?
Yes.
Please present it at this time.
Good morning, Chair Powers and members of the Commission. My testimony presents ORS's findings and recommendations resulting from the examination and review of Dominion Energy South Carolina's purchase gas adjustment during the review period. First, ORS reviewed the company's gas purchasing policies and practices and found them to be reasonable. ORS found the company is prepared to meet this winter's projected customers' requirements. Second, ORS found that Dominion administered and recovered its gas costs in a manner consistent with current Commission-approved tariffs and Commission orders. Third, ORS has reviewed the company's updated calculation of the demand cost of gas allocation factors as approved by the Commission in Order Number 2023-737A and agrees with these factors as calculated by the company to be implemented in January of 2025. On October 2nd, 2024, the company filed its gas capacity plan in compliance with Commission Order Number 2023-737A in docket number 2023-70G. ORS has not had sufficient time to examine and analyze the gas capacity plan or the conclusions contained therewithin. ORS submits that the gas capacity plan appears to provide several options to address the company's reserve margin reserve capacity margin through the 2032-2035 winter season. However, ORS has no recommendations regarding the gas capacity plan at this time. ORS reviewed the company's purchase gas forecast analysis report filed in compliance with Commission Order Number 2023-908 and the 2023 PGA. Docket number 2023-5-G. ORS does not have any recommended changes to the company's PGA mechanism. This concludes my summary.
Thank you. Chair Powers, this panel is available for questions from the company and the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Rainey. Any questions from Dominion?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner questions?
Chair Powers.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
And Ms. Kemp, you're the one that I was confused about earlier. So this is your first time here.
Yes, sir.
Well, welcome. And so you have experience in Alaska, correct?
Yes, sir. I worked at the Regulatory Commission in Alaska.
All right. Well, I've never been to Alaska, but would like to visit sometime.
It's a good trip. You should go.
I appreciate that recommendation. All right, so I have a question for you in connection with the 3 construction notices and projects. Do you happen to know if those were reviewed as part of the RSA proceeding recently?
Actually, yes. We looked at those for the RSA proceeding. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Seaman Wynn. So you talked about the gas capacity plan and didn't have time to review it at this point in time. So will that be part of an upcoming PGA docket or something else that you all will be able to get into that?
Commissioner, so the gas capacity plan was filed as part of the rate case, the 2023 rate case, and was filed earlier this month. In looking at the plan, we read it, and our ORS is continuing to hold internal discussions. We have not had any discussions with the company regarding the gas capacity plan, and they are in the initial stages. I would say the plan has some similarities to an electric integrated resource plan, and as the Commission knows, those take a substantial amount of analysis and review. We are still discussing internally what that review process will look like. I don't have any recommendations or a real response on the timeline or what that review, what the end result of that will be at this point, Commissioner.
Okay. And you heard the discussions about the review and evaluation of changing to the 18-month or 24-month time period for the gas, the PGA. Do you generally agree with the comments made by Ms. Smith?
I do. In looking at forecasts, my experience is similar to, or the results of my experience and review are similar to the company's. The further out you go in looking at a forecast, the less accurate you become. Closer in data is more accurate than looking further out. So ORS is not making any recommended changes to the 12-month forecast. In addition, the threshold of current 4-cent threshold provides is reasonable compared to the 5 cents that was evaluated within the report, and ORS doesn't have any recommended changes to that as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I have right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Any further commissioner questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much. Do you have anything else?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry, redirect? Any?
No. That we rest our case.
Okay, well, I guess that's it. You three are excused. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anything further to come before the commission on this case at this time? Our attorney will discuss with you about proposed orders and whatever schedule we need to. Otherwise, hope everyone has a happy Halloween. Leave the candy for the children. And have a good day. We're adjourned.